Hello, dear students. Today we are going to learn about a very interesting chapter, that is, how do organisms reproduce? Reproduction, which is also included as the essential life process. It is very important for continuity of life and it is also important for existence of species. We will learn about reproduction process in detail today. So, when we are talking about reproduction, as the word says, reproduce, the word itself is explaining that something is again going to form or produce. When any organism is producing any new organisms of its same kind, it is known as reproduction. So if we say what will be the proper definition of the word reproduction, we will always say that reproduction is when any organisms produces next generation of their same kind, right? Of their same kind. It has to be written in the definition because we all know that the dogs will give birth to puppies, the cats will give birth to kittens, cow will give birth to calves, and human being will give birth to babies. So we say that every organism is going to produce the next generation, and that process is known as reproduction. And the next generation must be of the same kind. So this is the definition of reproduction. Now, when we are talking about reproduction, we should understand that what are the different ways or the modes of reproduction. In the topic modes of reproduction, we must know that organisms are divided as bisexual and unisexual. It is mentioned within the name only. When we are saying the organism is bisexual, that means there are two sexes. There are two genders within same body. That means both male and female reproductive organs, reproductive structures are within the same body. Those organisms are called to be bisexual organisms, and those organisms where both the sexes, the male and the female body, are different. Those organisms are called as unisexual organisms. Mostly in bisexual organisms, we'll give example of flowering plants. Most of the flowers which we observe, flowering plants, they are bisexual, because if you say that in this flower you will see the female reproductive structure as well as the male reproductive structure. So the male and the female reproductive structure are within the same organ, flower, reproductive organ. So the flowering plants are mostly bisexual. There are some plants which are unisexual too. And in unisexual plants, we include papaya and date palm. Unisexual plants, examples are papaya and date palm. Whereas when we are talking about unisexual organisms, the male and the female reproductive organs are present in separate organism body. The male body is having the male reproductive organ and the female body is having the female reproductive organ. So there are two modes of reproduction which is based on the organism's sexuality. Okay? So if we say about modes of reproduction, we will say that modes of reproduction may be asexual and sexual. Asexual. Asexual means there are no requirement of two sexes. No two organisms, male and female, separate organisms are required. Single parent, either it is considered to be bisexual or unisexual. Single parent is capable to give rise to the next generation. So in asexual reproduction, we say single parent give rise to next generation. And in case of sexual reproduction, both male and female parents are required. So there are two modes of reproduction, that is known as asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, single parent will give rise to the next generation, and in sexual reproduction, both male and female parents are required to produce the next generation. Clear? The advantages of asexual and sexual reproductions are there, and there are disadvantages also of asexual and sexual reproduction. If I say that in case of asexual reproduction, what is the disadvantage here? The disadvantage of asexual reproduction is that because only single parent is involved in this process, whatever undesired characteristics, whatever undesired genes that parent is having, it will be transmitted to the next generation also, right? So we say the disadvantage of asexual reproduction is that undesired traits, or we say characters, are transmitted to next generation. One more point you have to remember as the disadvantage of asexual reproduction, that these organisms are not showing adaptations as per environment, because these organisms are getting the genes exactly same from the parent. They are not having any such type of variation, they are not having any such type of adaptation that they can accumulate themselves as per the changing surrounding. So that is one disadvantage with asexual reproduction. But there are advantages also of asexual reproduction. If we talk about the advantages in case of asexual reproduction, if we talk about advantage, the first advantage, that the offsprings or the next generation is identical copy, or we call it clone of their parent. Their identical copy of their parent. So there is no variation at all. This asexual reproduction is very rapid, right? Asexual reproduction is giving large number of offsprings. Okay? There are few advantages of asexual reproduction. The offsprings are exact copies of their parent. This reproduction is rapid. This is producing large number of organisms, offspring, and in this type of asexual reproduction, this type of reproduction is even possible in seedless plants. We say na that always a new plant need a seed to form. But in such plants where there is no seed formation, their asexual reproduction will take place, and because of that asexual reproduction, even the seedless parents can produce the next generation. So these are the advantages of asexual reproduction. After that, we have to also understand that what is the importance, what is the relevance of understanding this reproduction process. This reproduction process where the organism is producing its identical copy or its next generation, it is very much required for creating variations, and these variations are responsible for evolution. Evolution. In evolution, we always include the progressive development. You all must have heard that we are originated from ape. We have evolved from ape. We have progressed. We have better thinking capacity. We are more civilized because we have undergone this evolution. And why? Because evolution is resulted by variation, and this variation always shown in sexual reproduction. Whenever we talk about sexual reproduction where two parents are involved, which two parents are involved? Male and female. So in these two parents, two different gametes are formed. The male gamete and the female gamete. These both gametes with fuse with one another. They will form the zygote. This zygote is having the genetic material from both parent. And because of this, it will have the variations. Because of sexual reproduction, there will be variations. And these variations are the basis of evolution. Variation leads to evolution. Variation are responsible for the adaptations we made as per the changing environment. So whenever we talk about reproduction, we always say that reproduction is required for continuity of life, for existence of species, and for variations which will lead to evolution. That is the significance, that is the importance of reproduction as the essential life process. Now, we will talk about sexual and asexual mode of reproduction separately. As you can see here, in asexual reproduction, single parent is involved. Single parent is involved. Here in sexual reproduction, both male and female parents are involved. Right? When we differentiate between asexual and sexual, next point we will always mention, in asexual reproduction, offsprings are clones, identical copy of parent. But in case of sexual reproduction, variation, always offsprings show variations, and these variation leads to evolution. So this must be on our tips, that what is the basic difference between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction involves single parent, sexual reproduction involves both male and female parent. Asexual reproduction results into formation of clones, the identical copies of the parent. In sexual reproduction, there are always variations which are leading to evolution, which are leading to adaptation. In case of asexual reproduction, only mitosis takes place. If you remember, mitosis is known as equational cell division, where chromosome number remain same, right? So there is only mitosis taking place in case of asexual reproduction, whereas in case of sexual reproduction, meiosis occur during gamete formation, right? When does it occur? During gamete formation. Meiosis always occur during gametes formation. In asexual reproduction, there is no zygote formation. But in case of sexual reproduction, because gametes are formed, finally the gametes, they have to fuse. They have to undergo fusion. So after fusion of gametes, what is result? Zygote is formed. So these are the basic difference. What happens in sexual reproduction and what happens in asexual reproduction. This is a very basic question which is generally asked in a board exam. We should know what is the basic difference between asexual mode of reproduction and sexual mode of reproduction. Clear? So I think this much is clear for you. Now, when we are talking about the modes of reproduction, we will always start from the basic, that is the asexual mode of reproduction, and that too in unicellular organisms. We will start from very basic, very simple organisms, unicellular, single-celled organisms. And when we are talking about single-celled organisms, there are basic modes of asexual reproduction in these single-celled organisms, and these basic methods of asexual reproduction includes fission, budding, fragmentation. In animals, it is also called regeneration, and spore formation. We will study all these types in detail. There are basic 4 methods of asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms, which are including fission, budding, fragmentation, and spore formation. Fission. Fission generally means breakdown. Breakdown. So when a parent cell breaks into 2 daughter cells or many daughter cells, you called it fission. Budding. Budding is bud, which is an outgrowth. When any outgrowth develops on the parent body, it keeps on maturing and finally detached from the parent, start acting as a new individual, you call it budding. Fragmentation, when the parent body divides into pieces, fragments, and each piece will act as a new individual, we call it fragmentation. And last, spore formation, where spores are formed. What are spores? These are the round, thick-walled structures which can survive in extreme conditions. And when they get the favorable condition, they will germinate and form the new individual. So these are the basic methods of asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms. Let's study one by one in detail. First of all, let's talk about fission. As I told you, fission simply means breakdown. Who will break down? The parent cell will break down. Parent cell will break down into either 2 daughter cell or many daughter cell. If it's break down into two daughter cell, we call it binary fission. If it breaks down into many daughter cells, we call it multiple fission. Okay, but this is not enough. We have to remember the examples also. Binary fission generally seen in amoeba, paramecium, leishmania. Multiple fission is seen in plasmodium. Plasmodium, which is pathogen of malaria. Right? Examples also you have to remember. Fission is divided into two categories. If the parent cell is divided into two daughter cell, we call it binary fission. If the parent cell divides into multiple daughter cells, you call it multiple fission. An example of binary fission, amoeba, paramecium and leishmania. An example of multiple fission is plasmodium, which is responsible for causing malaria disease. Okay. Budding. So in budding, we will say an outgrowth develops. Like if I say yeast, it is a unicellular fungi, right? So there is a bud which is growing, then there are more buds which are growing. They keep on increasing in size, they will mature, and finally they will detach, and each one will act as a new yeast cell. This is called budding. In case of yeast, which is unicellular fungi. If I want to show you budding in hydra, hydra also shows budding. In case of hydra, like this is the organism which is having many tentacles on the body to catch their prey. On this body, a small outgrowth will develop. This will be acting as the baby hydra. It will grow and finally it will detach. And both the bodies will act as a individual hydra now. This is budding again. Clear? So we have fission and we have budding as the mode of asexual reproduction in organisms. Next one, we have to talk about fragmentation. Fragmentation where organism body divides into pieces or we call them fragments, and each fragment will develop into a new organism. Like if you say this is Spirogyra, so each fragment, it will divide into fragment and each fragment will develop a new Spirogyra. Like this, new. Each fragment develop a new Spirogyra. This is fragmentation. Now Spirogyra is algae. So you will say, is it only in plants? No. It is in animal cells also. It is in animals also. Like if I give you the example of planaria. It is a platyhelminth flatworm. In case of planaria, this is the structure of this organism. So if we cut its body into different pieces, each piece will develop into new planaria. Each piece will develop into new planaria. So this is again example of fragmentation, mode of asexual reproduction. From the single parent, new offsprings are produced. Then in case of some higher organism, like starfish, like lizard, in these organisms, if any of the body part is injured, then it can be replaced by the new body part. Here we are only talking about the repairing of the body part. If that body part is lost, new organism will not produce from that lost body part. Lost body part is degenerated. But in the place of that cutted or injured body part, new body part will regenerate. So this is an example of repairing in higher category animals. Mostly we don't include it in reproduction because we say reproduction is always producing new offsprings. But here also the cells are dividing and forming a new organ. That's why we have included it in the modes of asexual reproduction, where the lost or injured body part is regenerated. You have to remember the example of starfish arm of starfish, and lizard tail. These are the two examples which are showing regeneration. The last method of asexual reproduction, we all must be knowing, is spore formation. And there is a very lovely picture here. You can see all these are round structures are the spores. Spore formation generally occurs in aquatic algae or fungi. Fungi, they grow by spore formation because spores are formed in millions of number. They are so lightweight that they can spread with airflow, they can spread with water. So what happened in case of fungi, the fungi are mostly having filamentous structure. The filament of fungi is known as hyphae. The bunch of hyphae, the bunch of hyphae is called mycelium. Now what happened? When this mycelium gets the favorable condition, what is the favorable condition for fungi to grow? Moisture and low temperature, right? During rainy season it happens when the temperature is slightly low and there is moisture in humidity in the environment. In this favorable condition, on this mycelium, a stalk-like structure develops like this. It will having a round head, bag-like structure, and on that there will be multiple round structures, right? Like this. So we say this thread is actually the mycelium. This is called the sporangiophore. Sporangiophore. Phore means stalk. So the stalk which is carrying this sporangium, in which there are spores filled. This is sporangium. Single is sporangium, multiples are sporangia, and these are spores. When these spores get detached, they will germinate and form the new fungi. So this is how spore formation is a mode of asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms or lower category of organisms. So these are the basic asexual modes of reproduction that we all must know. They are fission, budding, fragmentation, regeneration is a method of repairing, and spore formation. Now after that, advantage of asexual reproduction, as we have discussed earlier also, quickly we will have a recap. Asexual reproduction always responsible for producing clones, identical copies. So identical copies will have one advantage. The desirable genes always transfer to the next generation. All the goody characters will be transferred to the next generation. This method is very rapid. Then there are large number of offsprings which are produced by asexual mode of reproduction, right? Then there is possibility of offspring production in seedless plants also. And it is very easy to propagate, to grow. Asexual reproduction is comparatively easy method for propagation, for growth of the organism. So these are the advantages of asexual reproduction. Now, if we are talking about modes of asexual in higher organisms, we will start from plants. Mostly these plants are the non-flowering plants or those plants which are not producing seeds in them, because seeds are always produced by the ovule. Ovule is always there in the flower inside the ovary. So those plants which are non-flowering, how they are going to produce? These non-flowering plants are going to produce by the asexual mode of reproduction, and in these plants we call this asexual reproduction mode as vegetative propagation. Let's understand the meaning of that term. Vegetative. Vegetative are the parts which are not doing reproduction actually, which are not doing sexual reproduction. They are included in vegetative parts. So vegetative parts say like stem, root, leaves. These are the vegetative parts, right? And propagation means to grow. Simple. What is the definition of vegetative propagation? If a new plant body is growing from the vegetative part, stem, root or leaf, we will call that reproduction as vegetative propagation. Now what is important? Vegetative propagation is taking place in the nature and it can be done artificially. Naturally, in nature, vegetative propagation is either by root or stem or leaves. What we have to remember? The examples. As I told you in this chapter, examples are very important. So when we are saying root, we will take example of ginger. So if you will take a ginger and you will dug it into the soil, then after a few days, after a few weeks, you will find new baby plants will generate from the roots of that ginger plant, ginger node. Then stem, here we will take example of potato. And in leaves, we will take example of bryophyllum. You must all remembering in your junior classes, your teacher must have shown you this type of leaf. Like this was a large thick leaf, and on the axillary margin, there are the baby plants coming out. So this is the speciality of this plant. When it falls down and come in contact with soil, from these margins, new baby plants rises and each baby plant will grow. So from the leaf, new baby plants are generated. These are the methods of natural vegetative propagation. Artificially, because we are agriculture based country, we are saying that plant breeders or mostly horticulturists, those who are growing vegetables and fruits, or floriculturists, those who are mainly developing the flower plants, they do these artificial vegetative propagation, in which we include the methods that we include in artificial vegetative propagation is stem cutting. You all must have heard in case of rose, stem cutting is the method of propagation of growing. Then there is layering. Layering is just generally done in jasmine, that is also known as mogra. Okay, what we do, jasmine is a shrub. So one branch of this shrub we will press in soil, and after a few weeks we will observe that from the nodal region which is having the meristematic tissue, new roots will develop and that particular branch will start acting as a new plant. So that is called layering method of growing new plants from each branch of the plant. And then we have stem cutting, layering and grafting. Grafting is a very interesting method, right? In case of grafting, what we do? We take two different plants. They can be of same species or different species. We take the stem part of one plant and root part of another plant. The root part is known as scion and stem part is known as stalk. We will combine them with the help of bandaging, and in bandaging these two parts of two different plants we use mosses because they absorb moisture for longer duration, and we will bandage those both different plants together, and after a few weeks what will happen, their vascular tissues they will club with each other, and that whole graft will start acting as an individual plant. And a very interesting example I will tell you here is tomato. Yes. So pomato is a plant which is generated by the method of grafting only. And what is the interesting fact about pomato? On the top region, on the aerial region, so many tomatoes are grown, and in the underground region, potatoes are grown. So that single plant is giving us two different products. From the underground part, we are getting the potatoes, and from the top part, we are getting tomatoes. So pomato is a plant which is generated by grafting method. So these all are the methods of vegetative propagation, which is a mode of asexual reproduction in plants. It can be done naturally and it can be done artificially. After that, there is the one more method, which is again in artificial propagation. Artificial vegetative propagation, we include tissue culture. Tissue culture, it is also known as in vitro propagation. In vitro propagation. In vitro here stands for in the laboratory. We are growing plants in laboratories. We have tissue culture laboratories where we can develop new plants. In the glasswares, in the test tubes, in the conical flask. What is the principle behind this tissue culture? Then we have to recall what we have studied in our junior classes. Like you all know that there are plant tissues which have the capacity to divide for whole life. What you call those tissue, if you remember? Meristematic tissue. So we will use any meristematic tissue part. Where these meristematic tissues are located in plants? They can be on the apical region, root tip, shoot tip. They can be on the nodal region, nodes of stem. They can be on the axillary buds, which are developing into new branches, or they can be in the seeds. So any of these plant part can be used for tissue culture. These meristematic tissue containing organs are considered to be explant. We will grow the explant. Explant is what? This meristematic tissue. It is used in few only. We will develop this explant, we will grow this explant on culture medium. Now this is something interesting. Culture medium is equivalent to the soil given to the plants to grow. What soil is providing to the plants? It is providing water, it is providing minerals, it is providing nutrients, right? Same thing, this culture medium is providing. It is having sucrose to provide food to the plant, it is having water, it is having minerals, plus it is having plant hormones. All those things which are required for the growth of plant. We will grow the explant on the culture medium. After some time, what will happen? This explant, which is transferred on this culture medium, will undergo differentiation with the help of plant hormones. First of all, it will grow, it will form callus. It will form callus by cell division, undifferentiated cell mass. Undifferentiated cell mass. Now when we provide it plant hormones, with the help of plant hormones like auxin, we will give it gibberellin also. With the help of these hormones, it will start differentiating. Auxin will help in development of roots. Gibberellin will help in development on shoots. And you will see this type of structure in the test tube. These are the baby plants which are generated from explant. All these baby plants, once they are grown, they will be transferred. The baby plants which are grown in the test tubes, they will be transferred to the greenhouse. Greenhouse like incubation chambers where we can control the light intensity, we can control temperature, we can control humidity. All these factors are under the control, and the soil which is present here, it is infection free, decontaminated soil. So your baby plant will learn how to grow in soil. It will get acclimatized for growing in soil. Once the baby plants get acclimatized in the greenhouse, they will be handed. The successful plants are handed to the farmers. This is how tissue culture is done. Why it is done? We are developing disease free. We are developing high yielding varieties. We are developing genetically modified plants with the help of tissue culture. It is again artificial method of vegetative propagation. So this is all about the different modes of asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms and in higher organisms. To understand the concept of sexual reproduction in plants and in humans both, we will continue. We will meet in next video. See you soon. Keep learning. Thank you.